but I want to just, share with you what has been going on here in Israel over this past week and a half already. As you mentioned, Pam, it was the holiday. It was not only Shabbat, it was also the holiday of Simchat Torah, where once a year we rejoice in the conclusion of the weekly Torah readings. We do all of the 5 books of Moses in an annual cycle, and we finish that at the end of the Feast of Tabernacles, and it's a day of great celebration. And like you mentioned, Friday night went just like, always. And I wasn't in Jerusalem. I was in Karnei Shomron in my own community in Samaria, and we were dancing and singing and just having a grand time. I did not know anything the next morning either, because where we are, we did not have any sirens. There were no missile attacks. It came as far as us. We are quite far from Gaza. In fact, until about a year or two ago, we thought it was impossible for missiles to reach here, but in some of the past engagements, there were missiles that came near here, so that we did have sirens. But this time we had no sirens, and I got up in the morning as usual, and I go to synagogue, and I have no idea that there was even an issue until about, I don't know, the people on the rapid response team did know that something was going on. But at that point, all we heard and all we thought, or all they thought even, was that it was one of the normal, unfortunately normal rocket attacks from Gaza to southern Israel. It was probably close to 9 o'clock in the morning. Our service began at 8. It was only close to 9 o'clock in the morning where there was an official announcement that something beyond just missiles have gone out. It looks like some people have been killed, and they were just basically saying, for now, where we are, everything is fine, but stay, be prepared, and making sure we all knew where the shelters and the safe rooms were. And of course, as the day went on, there were more rumors, there were more information, but because we didn't have our phones on or our TV or radio, we really only were seeing what was going on as more and more people were called up to the army, leaving. We knew something was going on, but it was only that night after Shabbat was over and we turned on the TV that we understood what everybody in Israel already at that point had understood, the full extent of this. But again, it was a number of days before we really understood the horrors. And as I'm sure you all know, it has been horrible. We have never put our faith in the terrorists by any means. The fact that they are capable of doing some of the horrific things they have done has not really surprised us. I think what is more surprised and shocked us that they were able to do it, not that they wanted to do it, that was not shocking, but that they were able to do it has been incredibly shocking. And it, as you can imagine, it has created quite a crisis of trust in the country, in our military, and in our government. And this has nothing whatsoever to do with politics. This is just a question of how is it that nobody knew? How is it that different activities that were going on along the fence there between Gaza and the rest of Israel, how come those things were not given greater attention? And to the extent to which what they have done is where hundreds, if not thousands, of terrorists poured across the gate there, the fence, broke down the fence in many different places, and there were hundreds of terrorists in any given community, far outnumbering the rapid response teams and the others that were really set up initially with the understanding that if there's an emergency, we're talking about maybe one terrorist, maybe two terrorists, and so being able to immediately put things together until the army comes. But in this case, they were so outnumbered, and this whole campaign, this whole attack was so carefully orchestrated that unfortunately they were able to murder so many people. At this point, they're talking about 1,300 people, mostly civilians, some soldiers that have been murdered. And this number keeps going up. As of now, 199 people, mostly civilians, some soldiers, have been captured and taken hostage to Gaza. Now, there has been no official notification on this from Hamas, from the International Red Cross. There hasn't even been an attempt on the part of any international bodies, those same international bodies that rush to condemn Israel and accuse us of war crimes. Nothing. They're not doing anything to try to insist, okay, of going to visit these hostages, and we are on our own on that issue. Now, I must say, though, that there has been some wonderful expressions of support from countries that are supporters of Israel and allies of Israel. The United States has really taken the lead on this, and we're also finding statements like this from Europe, and I believe Australia has as well. And this, of course, is very encouraging. Unfortunately, the United Nations has already rushed to say, "Oh, Israel, you better not, do anything that can possibly harm the civilians of Gaza." And even the United States, with all its amazing support, and they've sent at this point a flotilla, aircraft carrier, and now another aircraft carrier. It's on its way, or has already come here to the Eastern Mediterranean, which is a very, very important message to all of the nations in the region. Don't join this Hamas attack. And this is all very, very positive and very important. But at the same time, we're hearing messages from the United States that are saying, no, don't harm the civilians, okay? Now, one of the things that Israel has done, that Israel has mobilized, there are about 350,000 reserve soldiers that have been mobilized, most of those on Saturday itself, and others in the days that followed. Personally, I have two sons and my son-in-law who were all called up on Saturday and have been in different places, some in more dangerous places, some in less dangerous places. And of course, all of my friends have sons and son-in-laws that have been mobilized. All of us are extremely involved, by the way, in helping our grandchildren. I have two daughters-in-law and a daughter whose husbands are off, right? They've been mobilized, and they're on their own helping their children all last week. And until yesterday, school and preschools, all of that had been totally canceled. So on top of being worried for your husbands or for relatives or for whatever, these are all women having to take care of their children. We tend to have large families, so this is just one more issue that we've all been dealing with. I personally, my house, it actually was a happy thing, but my house was overrun with grandchildren all last week and the beginning of this until yesterday when they went back to school. We had some of them staying with us for a few days, and it was a very, very noisy home, but I must say it was a happy home. And that is the least we can do to provide our children and our grandchildren with a feeling of safety and encouragement and a place that the kids can play. And that is what we have done and what all my friends have done. But the horror of this, the horror of the way these terrorists have literally slaughtered innocent people, torturing, mutilating bodies, horrific stories. I don't even want to go into them. Has just, when people are saying today that this is Al Qaeda, this is ISIS, these are Nazis, this is not an exaggeration. There are Holocaust survivors who witnessed what was going on and who survived miraculously, have said to us, this is worse than anything they have ever seen in Nazi Germany, in the Holocaust, okay? This is absolutely outrageous. What Israel has done so far is ongoing attacks from the air on different places in Gaza. Whole streets and neighborhoods are in the process of being obliterated. They are trying to avoid hurting civilians, and there's quite a debate going on in Israel today. Most Israelis are quite firm in the need to keep up the blockade, which means no water, no electricity, no food, no fuel going into Gaza. We all support that because we believe that this is the only way that there will be pressure on Hamas to release these close to 200 hostages that they have. But right now, the Americans, for example, are pressuring Israel to allow these kind of things to come in for humanitarian reasons. But now I have to ask you a question. What exactly is a civilian? These people in Gaza, including women, including children, okay, what have they been doing all this time? Now, I'm sure there are some who don't like what's going on and they don't have much choice. But we see after every attack, including now with these attacks, we see people, men, women, and children going into the streets, cheering, celebrating, handing out candies. Okay? This is wonderful, they're saying. They have raised their children. These people who came in, they didn't just come in to kill Israelis, they came in to torture Israelis, slaughter Israelis, to do everything they could to make it difficult. There are right now about 300 bodies that have not been identified. They have the world's experts here working to identify bodies from DNA samples, from teeth x-rays. You can only imagine what is going on, that still 300 bodies have not been identified, and what those poor families are going through, where they don't even know, are their children alive? Are they dead? Are they taken capture? How do they know about the 199? Only because they're combing the internet to see the video clips that Hamas itself has put out. One of the people on television I heard the other day saying something very clever. He said the Nazis, they tried to hide their crimes. They were horrific, but they tried to hide their crimes because somewhere deep inside them, they knew this was not acceptable, which doesn't make them any less evil, of course. They were horrifically evil. But in this case, the Hamas is bragging about what they have done and are putting pictures all over the internet. And so people today are combing the internet to see if they can have evidence of certain people and people being asked to identify their loved ones through these film clips that have been put out by Hamas on Facebook, social media, Twitter, all kinds of places, so that they can then at least have an answer. Were they captured by the Hamas? Are they now in Gaza? So you can only imagine what this is doing to the families and the people here in Israel. Just before this, just 2 weeks ago, okay, and for the past year, as I'm sure all of you have seen, and we have even discussed this on this meeting over the past year, there have been horrific fights in Israel. Not military fights, of course, fights, protests. People love the government. People hate the government. People are protesting against the government. Judicial reform, is that good? Is that bad? Religious and secular tensions. It has been a very, very bad year. And it is very clear to all of us that one of the things that gave Hamas, and we're also talking about possible attacks from Hezbollah in the north, I will get to that soon. One of the things that may have encouraged our enemies to think that we were vulnerable was they looked at what was going on in Israel. There's no question. Our solidarity is one of our strongest weapons. And if we were seen to have lost that solidarity, that we were plagued by infighting, this became, in many ways, a encouragement or some kind of, extra push to our enemies to say, oh, this is a good time. We're going to catch them with their pants down. And that is probably an element of what happened. But what our enemies don't understand is that we, the nation of Israel, are actually a family. And we're a family in ways that most outsiders don't really appreciate. I know Pam and I were talking about this earlier, and she was responding to the kind of family solidarity that she was seeing within Israel while she was here. And this is something we've always known. And but people outside of Israel don't really understand that. And so I want to just spend a few minutes sharing with you about what is going on with that. So what do I mean when I say we're family? As soon as you hear that someone has been killed, that someone has been hurt, that someone has been taken, people feel it as if it's their own relatives. Now, we're also a small enough country that there isn't a person in Israel who doesn't know somebody whose family members or who themselves have been affected by this in a very personal way. I can tell you for myself, okay, I know personally 2 friends of mine, okay, their grandchildren were killed in this, in what happened on Saturday. Two of my personal friends have lost grandchildren. And there are people that are much, Shmuel, for example, has 2 very close friends who lost children. One, his daughter was missing, and they didn't know what had happened to her, and they just confirmed, they identified her body and confirmed that she was dead. For all they knew, she was kidnapped. They had no idea what happened to her. And this is something that, whether you know someone personally or whether you know someone who knows somebody personally, so it's not just this ideological sense of, oh yeah, we're one family, we all came from, we're all the children of Jacob or the children of Israel. Okay, this is really, there's like 1 degree of separation between anyone in Israel and what is happening today. We're all there, we feel it, and we feel it personally, and we feel it nationally. Also, we know that our enemies didn't kill this one or that one because they actually had something personal, some vendetta, or some issue with those people. Every person who was killed, captured, or injured was attacked because they're Jewish. No other reason. So it could have been me, and it could have been anyone in my family. And so in that way, we're all together. So how do we see this playing out? It was amazing. First of all, on Saturday, when they started the call-ups, as the day progressed, people who were not called up came anyway. So we're talking about not 100% response to these emergency call-ups. We're talking about something like 110%. Because even people who weren't called up are showing up at their units and saying, why didn't you call me, put me to work? There are hundreds, if not thousands, of Israeli young men and women who are in the reserves, who are abroad. There have been, my nephew, for example, just got out of the army a few months ago, and is very typical of Israelis after they finish their 3-year army service, which is a very intense time, very difficult time. They go traveling. He's been in the Far East, and he's been, all here and there. And right now he was in the United States, traveling, enjoying, seeing the sights. As soon as this happened, he contacted his unit. Here I am. And they immediately said, come back. And he spent days trying to get on a flight, and they were organizing flights. And we've seen now, and this is something that it's even been on TV, but we even see it personally from our children and our friends' children, etc. And in this case, my nephew, they are getting on planes and coming back to Israel, not to go home and have a shower. They're coming home to Israel to immediately enlist with their units and to help fight the good fight. And this is what is happening. We have doctors who have gotten on planes to come and help in the hospitals and in the clinics, because there's such enormous numbers of injured that have been going on. And this is just part of that solidarity and that unity that we are seeing. The arguments of 2 weeks ago, well, they're certainly still there in the back of our minds, perhaps at some level. But I can tell you one thing that has happened. People look back at those arguments and they are saying, what were we arguing about? It's so stupid. I'm not saying these aren't real arguments. Sure, you can have an argument, but to have that tear us apart in such a ridiculous way, people, slinging accusations at one another, is that really who we are? That's not who we are. It was stupid. We were arguing over stupidities. What we are doing now is the real thing. Every one of us, it doesn't matter if we're right, if we're left, if we're center, if we're religious, if we're traditional, if we're secular, it doesn't matter. Everybody is united in our determination to protect the people of Israel, to hold on to the state of Israel, and to do whatever needs to be done to defeat this terrible enemy. The IDF has, as I mentioned, has been firing intensively, destroying parts of Gaza from the air. But there's no question we will have a ground offensive, and many of our children who have been drafted will be part of that offensive. And that, of course, is very frightening to us, but it's something we are all united in understanding that it needs to be done. There's just nothing to be done about it. And leaders and all kinds of people have been saying the same thing over and over again. Israel cannot sustain itself if we allow Hamas to exist next door. If until now there was a very stupid and terrible miscalculation that somehow we can sustain a Hamas, that we can create enough deterrence, that we can stop enough localized events so that we can accommodate, so that we can remain in Israel and accommodate this terrorist beast next door. Today, it is very clear that there can be no place for any kind of terrorist beast next door. It has to be obliterated. What has now happened is, as I said initially, they cut off all the utilities, water, fuel, electricity to Gaza. What they did now is they opened up one water source only to southern Israel, to southern Gaza, with the idea being they're trying to encourage people who live in the northern part of the Gaza Strip to flee to the south. I have my own problems with that. I'm wondering, why do we have to tell them that we are attacking in the north, which is essentially what they're doing? They want to level the north, 100%, the north of the Gaza Strip. But those who are fleeing now, the Hamas, by the way, is trying to prevent these people from fleeing because they want these people to be killed. This is how Hamas looks after their own people. They want these people to be killed so they can then show the pictures to the world, see Israel, the terrible war crime, and they're killing civilians. So many people, they estimate that hundreds of thousands have already fled the northern part of the Gaza Strip to the south, which is the reason they're allowing only that bit of water, not anything else. And one of the reasons they're saying is water is not something that can be transported up north. Okay, you've turned off all the other water pipes. There's only one going, and that's the one going to the southern part of the Gaza Strip. It would be very, very helpful to us if Egypt would open its doors and allow these people to go into Egypt. First of all, we want to get rid of them. We can't deal with these people anymore. Okay, and let Egypt deal with them. Egypt, of course, is not too keen. They don't want them in there. So that's an interesting thing to monitor what will happen there. But from our perspective, we have no problem with the humanitarian crisis, because a humanitarian crisis may well be the only way that we, in addition to military attacks, etc., that we can pressure Hamas and perhaps pressure the international community to do whatever it can to ensure that these 199 people are released. That's the first thing. Before we even do anything else, that has to take precedence. We are hoping and praying that the military will succeed. They are definitely determined. The soldiers themselves have unbelievable motivation. It is so encouraging to see the people I'm talking to, the videos that are going around. Soldiers are making videos of themselves. Here we are, we're ready to go. You know, let us go in and attack this enemy and destroy them. We are not interested in destroying people for revenge. We need to destroy Hamas. We need to ensure that they can never again pose a threat to us. We need to get rid of the terrorists. We need to get rid of their weapons. There needs to be a situation where there isn't a single bullet, a single knife, a single missile, a single terrorist that is left in Gaza when we finish this campaign. We are not on a campaign, actually. We are at war. What's happening in the rest of the country? In the north, Hezbollah has already sent rockets. They have already attacked some of the camera installations that enables the soldiers on the northern border to see what's going on across the border. And this was how Hamas began the war. They shot out from drones. They shot out all the cameras along the fence so that the people monitoring the fence couldn't even see what was happening until they got right in front of their door. And so this is something we're seeing, the beginning of this in the north, and Israel is mobilizing across the northern frontier. We do not know if they will attack us, Hezbollah, if Israel will take a preemptive strike. We have no idea, but it is extremely vulnerable on the northern border. And in fact, Israel has recommended to all the citizens living within the few kilometers of the northern border to evacuate. So today we have thousands, tens of thousands of people who have been evacuated from their homes. The people just outside of Gaza, those communities that were overrun by Hamas, in most cases, the homes were torched, set to fire, they're destroyed. These people have been evacuated. Those who have survived the massacre have been evacuated. They have no homes to go back to. People from further out, Sderot, for example, they just evacuated. This is a city, a town of about 30,000 people, okay, who have been evacuated. Now they're evacuating some of the smaller communities along the northern border. What is going on here in Judea and Samaria? Especially last week, there were some attempts at infiltration. We are seeing, some attempts at going on, but there are massive soldier presence here. You need to understand that with this call up that took place last Saturday, most of the people on the rapid response teams, as well as most of the men between the ages of 18 and 40, have now been called up to the IDF, or the younger ones were in the IDF as regular soldiers anyway. So we have communities, especially the smaller communities, that really have been left with almost nobody, no men there, and no rapid response teams. The IDF has now moved reserve soldiers into those communities to protect those communities from attack. But what we are finding in many of these communities is that they do not have enough equipment. This has been a problem all along, and I have to say that CFOIC has been extremely helpful, and I have to thank many of you who have been part of this effort. We have been extremely involved in providing emergency equipment to communities so they are prepared for just such a scenario. But I have to admit, as I said, until now, the scenario that was anticipated was 1 or 2, 5 terrorists at most coming into a community, making sure that our rapid response teams had what they needed, that we had cameras that were being monitored, that we had the right helmets, that we had bulletproof vests, that we had communications equipment, making sure they were well equipped. Okay, but now that is not enough. There are communities, first of all, who we never managed to make sure they were equipped well enough. But now, for example, we got a call last week from a community. There wasn't almost no men left in the community. It's a young community, so there aren't any older, middle-aged and older men in that community. There's almost no men in the community. They've all been called up, and they need a drone, a surveillance camera drone, in order to at any moment just send it up, see what's going on, to help them compensate for the fact that they don't have the same kind of personnel protecting the community that they did. And that's something, thank God, that we were already able to raise the funds for. Like within a couple of days, funds came in for that. But we're getting similar calls for equipment like this from communities all over Judea and Samaria. We anticipate that as tensions grow between Israel and Gaza, as the invasion begins, we don't know what's going to happen in the north. The next step will be Judea and Samaria. And I have to tell you something, that this is my own assessment. I came up with this assessment a couple of days ago, and this morning for the first time heard someone refer to it as a possibility. But the more I think about it, the more I am convinced. Those of you who are following us, who have been in touch with us, know that over the past few months, we have seen quite an increase in terrorist attacks in Judea and Samaria, most of them coming from Hamas and Hamas-related organizations. Just before this attack happened on Saturday, a few days before, in anticipation of increasing terrorist attacks in Judea and Samaria, a number of the units that were responsible for protecting the border with Gaza were transferred to Judea and Samaria. The thinking at that point, terribly wrong thinking, human error, a wrong thinking, but this is what happened. They assumed that Hamas was not a serious threat right now, and therefore they reduced the forces that were there at the border with Gaza and moved them into Samaria because of all the attacks that we have been seeing in recent months in Judea and Samaria. I believe that this was a coordinated strategy. I believe that these attacks that for months, okay, the talking heads and the military experts have been trying to think, why now? Why? What has happened now that suddenly we're seeing much more terrorism in Judea and Samaria? And today it has become very clear to me, at least, that this was part of a coordinated strategy. Turn up the fire in Judea and Samaria so that Israel is diverted away from where the real problem is going to be. And that's exactly what happened. They moved some of these critical soldiers into Samaria, and they were left with their pants down at the border of Gaza. And we all saw what happened. There's no question that this is coordinated, that the Hamas in Samaria, next door to me, in the village of Azun, is a Hamas headquarters. We know this, the army knows it, the security services and the intelligence, they know it, and they're being monitored. We here in Karnei Shomron need to be sure that our community is protected, because we don't know. We saw there was a tremendous intelligence failure of not being able to give us warning. We don't know right now where Hamas will attack next. And so one of the things that we're involved with is to make sure these communities are protected in the event that the attacks come here in Judea and Samaria. That is more or less, I've only touched on a few highlights to give you a sense of what's going on here, but I would really like to give you all the opportunity to ask questions. How do you want to do this, Pam? Everybody like raise their hand or put up one of those Zoom hands or whatever?
I think we should put up the Zoom hands. If you have a question, that would be great. Okay, I can't see any hands.
Here, Mark, I see.
Mark.
Yeah,
okay.
Thanks, Sondra. Can you fill us in on the situation on the northern border?
Okay, so what's happened there is there have been some artillery and missiles sent across on the northern border. Every time something like that happens, the Israeli Air Force responds and immediately attacks the sources of the fire. There's also been attacks against some Hezbollah strongholds in Lebanon and even in Syria. There was an attack near Damascus just a few days ago. Some of these attacks are actually things that are happening all the time, because Israel is constantly monitoring things like movement of arms to Hezbollah from Iran through Syria. And these are the kinds of things that have been attacked on a regular basis. So we're seeing more of that happening. I don't know, if it's more than that. There was a young man that was killed up there on the northern border a couple days ago. He is somebody who was the son of a teacher. His last name is Granot. His father is a very, very popular rabbi and teacher. He's the head of a yeshiva, Tamir Granot. I have listened and participated in many of his classes, although I don't know him personally. But this is somebody that was killed up there just a couple days ago. Very, very tragic. A young man. I think he was 24. So things are going on in the north. I know that many soldiers have been mobilized to the north. Right now, it's kind of in a wait and see thing. We don't really know if the IDF is going to, start something there to prevent, being surprised or not. That's still something we have to wait and see.
So we have Anne from Brisbane. Would you like to ask your question?
Sondra, when we give to CFOIC the usual way, how can we then say we want it to be used for weapons or something, or medical equipment? How specific, or what do you want us to say?
Okay, so first of all, we are not buying weapons. We are not allowed to buy weapons and retain a charitable status, which is very important to us. We are able to buy things of a defensive nature. For example, bulletproof vests, helmets, communications equipment, electronics, for fences, and everything that will make us safer from a protective point of view. We also don't need weapons, because anyone who needs to have weapons, the IDF has plenty of weapons, and that is handed out. How do you do this? It is enough to donate in the regular way and just write emergency or security, and that will then go to whichever communities have the greatest needs. The needs are, as I said, are coming in all the time. And as the money's coming in, we're going to be making decisions as how to best distribute those funds to who needs it most. And of course, the more funds we get, the less choices we will have to make, because I certainly hope that we can really accommodate anybody. But thanks, Anne.
Marion?
Thanks, Pam. Hi, Sondra.
Hi, Marion.
Did I hear you say the children went back to school?
The children went back to school in most of the country, not in the South. The South is still out. In our part of the country, in Judea and Samaria, the center of the country, in Jerusalem, I believe, children have gone back to school part-time. Our kids started back yesterday. Every community is making its own judgment. First of all, one of the issues are, do they have teachers? So in elementary schools here in the community, grades 1 through 4 have gone back to school for 4 hours a day from 8 to 12. The preschools and the daycare centers have also gone back from like 7:30 to 12. So it's a half day kind of thing this week, starting yesterday. So it's better than nothing. Okay, it's better than nothing. It is giving don't forget, people, their husbands are drafted, they're with the kids were home, they can't work. Now there's a lot of understanding about this, but some of the people are working in what's called essential services, and so they really have to work. And there have been a lot of volunteers that were stepping in to help watch the children. But for now, the goal is to try to get as many children back to routine as possible, constantly assessing the situation. Now, schools all have shelters and secure rooms. They all have them. And if they don't, then they can't go back to school. In other words, but they should all have them. And so this is, part of the issue. Another problem, though, is the school teachers, like in my grandson's school here, it's a school where many of the teachers are men. And in most of the schools, most of the teachers are women, who are, for the most part, not being drafted. In schools where a lot of the teachers are men, this becomes a bigger problem, because most of them, unless they're older, the young ones have all been drafted. And so the schools are, scrambling to get substitutes and to combine classes. And, so it's not a simple sort of thing logistically.
I was just, apart from that, I was just remembering seeing that there was a couple, well, I only saw 2 young couples that got married had a kind of wedding quickly down near Gaza. I thought that was just very moving, a beautiful thing that, the husband may go into war, and I thought it was really a beautiful thing to see.
I'll tell you, I don't know if some of you may remember Shira Schwartz, who worked for us at CFOIC many, many years ago. Most of you probably were not involved with us at that time. Some of you may remember her. So she lives 2 doors away from me, and her son is scheduled to be married in 2 weeks, and he is in the Army, and they have no idea if that wedding will be able to go forward. Just totally up in the air. So, and what they'll do, who knows? But we'll see.
Yeah.
But thanks. That's a wonderful comment.
Some of the people in the community I was staying with, they actually walked up near the Western Wall on the Monday, and there were 2 weddings going on at the Western Wall on the Monday. So
wow.
I know. So yes, and it's perhaps that those men were being drafted, so the wedding went forth. Amazing things. I'll just interject for a second and say, I went up to the Ordinary shopping centre, And I just was going to, I didn't know if we were leaving or staying, so we were told to get some water. The lady at the checkout just said to me something that just blew me away. She randomly said to me, "We're not afraid of war. I'm not afraid of coronavirus. I'm afraid of not being a good person." And I just like, oh my gosh, like this is the character of the people in Israel, Sondra. She just was, no, we have to do good deeds and be kind. And that just was amazing. So yes, it's amazing. We have a question from Judy. How long do our extra donations take when we put them in the Australian bank account to reach Israel?
Oh, it's right away. In other words, we monitor that account every few days. We know exactly what's there. We usually wait till a certain amount is accumulated, and then we transfer it to Israel. We transfer it to Israel. It's a matter of minutes. Okay, it's all done digitally. It's very fast. So we're constantly monitoring what's there, and we make sure to transfer it as soon as we need it to give out to the community. So it is a very, very immediate way of donating, and I want to encourage it. But if you do donate through the Australian bank account, two things. Number one, please, it's very helpful to us. Sometimes the person's name or ID or phone number, whatever, does not show up. So just send us an email and say, I just put, a donation in or even mention the amount. I just put it in the account today, track it. And if you wanted to go for something in particular, again, note that in an email to us. And the best person to send that email to now is to Shmuel. I'm now putting his, one second, I'm putting his email in the chat. So you can see his email, Shmuel@cfoic.com. If you make a donation, just send him an email telling him to look for it, how much it was, and if you have a particular earmarking request. And again, if you just wanted to go for the emergency security, that's all you need to write. Emergency security, and it'll go to that.
Thank you, Sondra. Jeff, would you like to ask your question?
Today we're about Shabbat Shalom. That's the best I can do for Australia from here.
That sounds good. It's good.
Two questions. One is, has the attacks unified the government? Because we understand that there's a bit of friction here between parties. And is the Hasidic Jews involved in the defense of Israel?
A very good question. So first of all, already on the first Saturday, there was an amazing pressure coming from the nation. Put your arguments behind you. All the opposition, come into this government. This is not a time for quibbles. Now, from the beginning, the opposition, with the exception of the Arab parties, let's leave that out. There are not that many of them, but those members of Knesset we're not hearing anything from, and that's just fine. Just shut up. At this point, that's the best thing we can hope from them. But everybody else is unified in supporting the government and everything it's doing militarily. There's no question. There's a lot of criticism against the government right now for what happened. Okay, but it is a consensus. We are not discussing this, even on television, on radio. Everyone's saying there are questions. We know that. We will revisit these questions when the war is over and we have defeated Hamas. This is not something we're discussing now, and that is unity between the opposition and the government. Since then, though, I would say that Benny Gantz, who's the head of the second largest party in the opposition, has always been seen as a much more moderate kind of party. He actually, within his party, has some right-wing people, has some central people, has a few not so left-wing, but a little left-wing people. And he, from the beginning, said, I am here. I'm willing to join the government. I have absolutely no preconditions for joining the government other than to have a position of influence in the conduct of this war. And he did come in with his party. He has those kinds of positions of influence and authority. to be at the table. That's what he wants, to be at the table when they're making, he is a former chief of staff of the IDF. He has a great deal of experience, as is Eisenkot, another person who was a former chief of staff. So by coming in, they have put their experience before us. And that's basically what has already happened. But nobody really now has the patience for anything in politics. We just want to see the smartest people in the country who have the most experience to join the effort and just get the job done.
Very good. John Winlow, would you like to unmute, John? You have to unmute. Yeah, that's it. Unmute.
You're speaking to me. Yes, I had a question, but I say, Sondra, I will ask for it after the war because, well, it's.
Oh, that's okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Sorry.
John Winlow, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I've done it. I found it now.
Did it. Okay, excellent.
I was trying to do it on a little picture.
Right.
So, Sondra, as a Jewish American, now Israeli, what do you feel about the American stance on all of this? Because from what I understand, Biden's administration has been doing everything to help Iran, releasing funds which Iran has used to bolster its proxy fighters. Yeah, and now America's come in and sent two big warships into the Mediterranean. What's going on with them?
Okay, so this is how I read it. First of all, I did listen very carefully to Biden's major address on this issue last week, and I have to tell you, I was very impressed. It was an amazing speech. Very, very great solidarity with Israel, and it was very clear to us. Number one, that he had seen the worst of the pictures of what had happened in Israel and the massacre that had taken place, and that he was truly and honestly shaken to his very core. I do believe that Biden is not at all an anti-Semite. I believe he is pro-Israel. I believe he has adopted policies that are not good for, at least the way I view Israel's policies. But you can never say about Biden that he's anti-Israel. We may not like some of his policies. We may think that they are bad for Israel. I don't like the way he treated Netanyahu through all this protest and everything. But you can't, the man is not an anti-Semite. He's not an anti-Zionist by any means. Okay, so what we saw in that speech was a very passionate identification with Israel, and he's putting actions behind his words by sending these aircraft carriers. However, there is still a problem in the way Americans view this whole conflict. Okay, they are still stuck in this stupid paradigm of two-state solution. They, for example, I'm sure, would be very happy for Israel to get rid of Hamas and install Abbas instead. We don't want Abbas instead. Nobody in Israel wants Abbas instead. Okay, and if you want to look and see what has the Palestinian Authority done recently, they did not condemn this event at all. And then at one point, as a result of serious pressure coming from the Americans on Abbas to issue at least a statement saying we condemn the savage acts of butchery, they put out a statement of condemnation and within a very short time erased it. Because this is where they really are. So maybe somebody said, well, Biden is pressuring us, we better do this. And then then they said, wait, on second thought, we cannot, turn our backs on our Muslim Arab brothers in the Hamas. And at the end of the day, that's where they stand. So the way I see it, I think America has the American administration, definite support for Israel, but it's very important for Israel to stand on these issues where they're not going to agree with the Americans. If the Americans are pressuring Israel to open gas and water and oil and electricity, Israel has to say, I'm sorry, this will compromise our ability to defeat Hamas. If you want to take care of the civilians, pressure Egypt to open its borders, let them all go in there, and you and Egypt can take care of all the humanitarian people or whatever in Egypt. Do whatever you want. Leave us the freedom to do what we need to do in Gaza. And this is really a consensus in Israel that this is what needs to be the attitude. And this is one of my concerns. I'm hoping that indeed Israel will be able to stand against these kinds of issues for Biden. In terms of Iran, from the beginning, I think Biden's strategy with Iran was faulty. I don't think he loves Iran, but he, like so many people in America who really believed that you can appease the beast. And so he released this money and he said, because we're going to sit down, we're going to have coffee, we're going to be able to convince the Ayatollahs that they really don't want to develop nuclear weapons. Well, of course they want to develop nuclear weapons. These are evil people. And you cannot appease evil people. And if I look at the situation, I see World War II, Chamberlain and Winston Churchill. Chamberlain didn't think Hitler was a nice guy, but he was convinced that he could appease him. And if he appeased him, we would avoid war. And of course, that proved to be a disaster. And in the end, Churchill got up and said, Churchill had no choice because, already Nazi Germany is invading Poland and invading France and all that stuff. But this is a similar kind of thing. I don't think Chamberlain was evil. He was just dead silly. Wrong. He was dead wrong. Yeah. And we have to see how it all plays out now.
Yeah. Thank you, Sondra. It's coming through to closing the meeting, but I think we have
Kirsten, I think,
who's been waiting there. So we have time for Kirsten's question. Would you like to ask it?
Shalom, Sondra. I may be wrong, so please correct me if so. But as I understand it, Hamas is an acronym in Arabic for the longer name of the terror group. But in Hebrew, you also have this word Hamas. And this week is the Torah portion about Noah, where God says that he decided to send a flood because of the evil and Hamas. Is that true? And we also just come into the month of Cheshvan, I think, and that's the month of the flood. So could this be some kind of biblical encouragement that this week will Hamas be destroyed?
Well, that's very interesting. No question. This word Hamas is a word that is translated in different ways in different Bibles as evil, as lawlessness, as corruption. But it is the word Hamas is the word in the Bible. That is what, and this is in Genesis 6, verse 13. God said to Noah, I have decided to put an end to all flesh, for the earth is filled with Hamas. Okay? Because of them, I'm about to destroy them with the earth. So this becomes this evil activities of the generation of the flood is what propels God to destroy everybody in the flood. So yes, this is definitely something that people are looking into. And it's, I'm not sure about the date. I'd have to look that up, when exactly it started. I know it's something in the 7th month, but the 7th month was already last month. I would have to look that up. But Cheshvan, the month we are in now, is the 8th month of the year. And in the Bible, the months are numbered. So I would have to look and see if indeed this was during the 8th month. I'm not sure, but it certainly would be very interesting. So yes, let us pray that indeed God will obliterate the terrorists and the way he obliterated the Hamas in the time of the flood.
Yes.
Because the Haftarah text is also from Isaiah 54, where it says that no weapon will have success that the enemies put against you, and that the Lord will put your enemy down. So I think this is a very comforting text this week, yes, in the episodes that is coming. So
yes, and it is indeed a text that people are referring to today.
Excellent. Thank you.
I did want to just conclude with one quick thought before I turn this over to you, Pam, and I know we've kind of gone over our time, but there's a chapter in the book of Psalms that I have looked at this week, and chapter 20, which we don't have time to read the whole chapter. It's a very interesting chapter, because basically David, the psalmist, is kind of talking to somebody, and it's as if and one of the commentaries say he's talking to his general, to Yoav, before he goes to war. So the beginning of it is a very interesting statement of David talking to someone who's about to go into danger, and it's a very moving type of statement that says God will look after you, God will remember how you pray to him, how you made offerings to him, and he will protect you. And it's a wonderful, wonderful psalm to say over, our soldiers, in kind of encouragement to our soldiers. But the end of it is he's saying, now I know that the Lord will give victory to his anointed, will answer him from his heavenly sanctuary with the mighty victories of his right arm. They call on chariots, they call on horses, but we call on the name of the Lord our God. They collapse and lie fallen, but we rally and gather strength. O Lord, grant victory. May the King answer us when we call. And I think this is the answer. They came in and surprised us with weapons and numbers far in extent to what we expected. Of course, we right now have more chariots and have more horses, so to speak, tanks and weapons and all that than they do. But at the end of the day, our secret weapon, so to speak, is the God of Israel.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, thank you so much, Sondra, for this update. And I'd like to let everybody know I've put my email in the chat, pamgay22@gmail.com. You may notice I've been busy writing and busy looking and everything. I've made 12 prayer points from what Sondra has spoken to us today. I'd like to offer, if you would like a copy of the prayer points, please email me. There's 34 of us here, and I'd like to thank you all personally for showing Sondra our support in this hour. And I'll say, try not to cry. But I've read through the notes of the chats, and I think I've spoken about what you've written, and thank you for your comments, everybody. Please stay on the CFOIC website. Sondra and Shmuel are updating as often as it's necessary, but definitely each week. I encourage you to speak in the churches where you are, in the communities, and ask the pastors if there could be some funding for any kind of security object that these communities need. Be bold and step forward and ask, because there's no harm in asking. And we all know our churches fund many projects. It's a call to this hour to help fund Israel with security. So, and thank you, Judy. Now, to close, I asked the Lord, well, what are we going to close with, the scripture? And he showed me, he told me, Zechariah 12 and the first couple of sentences. And it talks about Jerusalem is going to be a cup to the nations. And it says, I will strike every horse with confusion and its rider with madness. I will keep my eyes on the house of Judah, but will blind every horse of the peoples. So, Lord, we finish and close with this prayer that you will do the things you did in the Judges and Chronicles, where you sent an angel, one angel could disrupt 186,000. Lord, send the ministering angels to disrupt their plans and to send them into confusion. and let us all stand victorious with the people of the land and the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because he will prevail. Wake up the nations. Let us see truth coming out of what is in front of our eyes. Expose any darkness, deals made in the dark. Lord, bring them out into the front so that we can see truth and we can stand on truth. I praise you, Lord, to bless the people in Israel. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And if you're not on our mailing list, you're not getting notices about these meetings, send an email to me or to Shmuel and ask with your email address and ask to be put on our lists.